My name is Amina. I am 24 years old and I was born into a devout Muslim family in a small conservative community where everyone's life was measured by piety and obedience to tradition. From the earliest moments I can remember, my days were consumed by prayers, recitations of the Quran, and strict routines that left little room for freedom or questioning. My mother was fiercely devoted, and her love was intertwined with fear. She watched me with piercing eyes, always ensuring I performed every prayer correctly, never missed a fast, and memorized each surah perfectly. My father was gentle but distant. He allowed my mother to shape our lives according to her vision of devotion. I was outwardly obedient. I prayed 5 times a day, fasted during Ramadan, wore the hijab without complaint, and smiled at the praise of neighbors and relatives. Yet, inside me, there was a hollow ache, a deep yearning for something I could not name. I would lie awake at night, feeling a strange emptiness in my chest, a quiet hunger for peace that I did not know how to satisfy. I remember the mornings when I would gaze at the sun rising over the dusty rooftops of our neighborhood, feeling an unexplainable longing in my heart that made me question whether anyone else felt this way or whether I was broken. I could never tell my mother. She had no patience for doubt. Questions were dangerous and often seen as rebellion. I remember hiding under my blanket, whispering prayers. I wasn't sure anyone heard praying, not for obedience or reward, but for relief, for a sense of truth, for something real. Even in school, I felt the tension of expectation and the hollowness of routine. I memorized verses I did not understand, recited them with precision, but without connection. My classmates spoke of Allah's mercy and justice, and I nodded, but my soul whispered a different question, something beyond fear or reward, something like, why do I feel so empty? Why do I long for something I cannot name? The pressure at home compounded everything. Mother's voice was sharp and commanding, reminding me constantly of my duty and threatening consequences if I faltered. Her love was conditional, a performance I could never fully earn. I remember lying in my room, crying silently, afraid of disappointing her, yet aching for freedom. I longed for warmth that did not come with judgment or fear. In those nights, I began whispering to God silently, if He existed, please show me the truth, please give me peace. I did not know if Allah could hear a whisper from a trembling girl hidden under the covers, but I prayed anyway because hope was all I had. Even now, as I speak to you, if you have ever felt that quiet ache in your soul, the hunger for something more than what the world has offered you, are not alone. And if this story reaches your heart, even in a small way, I want to invite you to subscribe to this channel, like this video, comment, and share it. Stories like mine are not just mine. They are meant to touch others who feel lost like I once did. Even as I share, my chest tightens because I know what is coming. I know the safe, predictable world I knew is about to shatter, and I am not yet ready for the pain that will follow. Yet something deep inside whispers that I cannot turn back, and that whisper is the first crack in my soul, the beginning of a journey. I cannot ignore the awakening of a hunger for a love I have never known. It began with small things I could no longer ignore. The hypocrisy around me, the sermons that preached mercy and justice while the imams lived in secrecy and excess. I remember watching a man in the mosque scold a child for missing a prayer while quietly accepting bribes for marriage certificates and dowries. My stomach twisted and I whispered under my breath, "Is this really faith?" At home, the tension grew unbearable, my mother's eyes sharp and demanding, every misstep magnified as if I were a criminal. I recall one evening, after faltering slightly in my recitation, she slammed her hand on the table and hissed, "Do you want Allah to punish you?" I froze, my heart racing with fear, and yet inside a spark of defiance flickered. I remembered childhood moments when her love had been conditional, a reward for obedience, a frown for perceived failure. I remembered hiding in my room, crying for hours, wishing I could disappear, wishing I could belong somewhere that did not terrify me. The tension between my fear and my curiosity became suffocating. I began questioning in secret, is this all there is? Is this justice? Is this love? I whispered these questions when I thought no one could hear them, trembling with terror, yet yearning for answers. Each day, I noticed more contradictions, the way my father smiled at worldly gain while insisting on our piety, the way neighbors pretended and preached yet judged anyone who faltered. I felt trapped between what I was taught to revere and what I witnessed in reality. My heart longed for something real, something that did not make me afraid or ashamed. I read stories of people who had dared to seek truth, who had risked everything to follow it. I began dreaming of a life where faith was not fear, where love was not conditional. My curiosity became an ache I could not ignore. Then it happened. One night, I left a small notebook in my drawer where I had written my private thoughts, questions about God, justice, and the emptiness in my heart. My mother found it. Her eyes widened with fury and she shrieked, "How dare you think like this? How dare you question what Allah commands?" Her voice was loud, sharp, unrelenting, and in that moment I felt my world collapse. I wanted to disappear. I wanted to crawl under my bed and never be seen again. But something inside me would not let me be silent. I felt a strange mixture of terror and awakening. I realized my soul had crossed a threshold. There was no going back. The fear of punishment was real and immediate. Yet alongside it, there was a new awareness that I could not ignore, that I had glimpsed something beyond the safety of obedience and the hollow rituals that had surrounded me. My mother's fury shook me to my core. I felt the weight of years of indoctrination and love twisted with fear pressing down on me. And yet, in the midst of it, a quiet voice in my heart whispered that there was more, that life was not meant to be lived only in fear, and that my longing for peace and truth was not wrong. I lay awake that night, trembling, my chest tight, my mind racing with terror and possibility. I knew that from this moment forward, every step I took would be dangerous. Every word I spoke could invite shame or punishment, and yet I could not turn back. I had tasted a spark of something I could not name, and it was already consuming me, the first crack in the walls of my soul, the first step toward a journey that would change me forever. I realized that fear and hunger can exist in the same heart, that the safe world I had known was gone, and that the choices before me were both terrifying and exhilarating. I began to seek answers in secret, late at night, when the house was silent and my heart raced with both fear and excitement. I opened my phone and typed words I knew I was not supposed to type. Who is Jesus? What does the Bible say about love and forgiveness? Each search felt like a betrayal, like stepping into forbidden territory. My fingers trembled and my chest tightened with every click. I read stories of people who had found peace in him, stories of grace and mercy that did not demand fear or punishment. I felt an ache in my chest and a thrill at the same time, as if I were standing on the edge of something I could not yet understand. I whispered to a friend in hushed tones, sharing my questions about Jesus, about love, and a God who wanted relationship, not obedience. She listened and encouraged me to explore quietly, to read carefully, to keep my heart open, but my mouth closed. My family's shadow hung over me constantly. I imagined their eyes watching. I imagined the punishment and shame that could fall upon me if discovered. Yet the longing in my soul was stronger than fear. Dreams began to haunt me at first. Vague flashes of light, a man standing just beyond, reach a warmth that filled me even as I shivered. I could not see his face clearly, but his presence was undeniable. I would wake in the dark heart, hammering sweat on my skin, whispering, "Who are you? Who is this?" Sometimes I felt him speak, not in words, but in the hollow places of my chest, in a quiet knowing that there was more that I could not yet name, and yet I recognized it immediately. One night, the dream was different. He spoke clearly, his voice soft yet piercing, "Amina." He called me by name and my knees shook. I woke drenched in sweat, trembling with awe and terror. At the same time, I could not breathe for a moment, the words echoing in my mind. I lay there, heart racing, chest tight, thinking I had imagined it. And yet I could feel his presence still lingering, like a gentle flame burning in the hollow spaces inside me. I began to realize that what I was feeling was not just curiosity. It was a pull, it was a calling. It was the whisper of a love that sought me out, even as fear sought to silence me. Every time I opened a website or read a story, I felt both thrill and dread. Every whispered conversation with a friend was both liberation and risk. I was walking a narrow path I could not tell anyone about. I was living two lives, one in fear of discovery, one in secret devotion to this new yearning. I did not know how to reconcile them. Yet the more I read, the more I prayed, the more I whispered to this unseen God, the more I felt an internal peace slipping into the hollow ache I had carried for so long. It terrified me that peace could exist and that it felt so real, so tangible, so undeniable. I could feel tears pressing behind my eyes for the first time, not of sadness, but of longing, fulfilled in glimpses, could not explain. I began imagining a world where I could follow him openly, where I could speak his name without trembling, where love was not conditional and fear was not the ruler of my life. And I realized that I was being called not just to curiosity, but to something far greater, a journey I could not yet fully see, but that was already shaping every thought and every heartbeat in me. I knew I could not turn back. The first true pull toward him had taken root, and it would not let go. The tension between fear and desire grew unbearable, and I lay awake, trembling, heart racing, realizing that everything I had known and feared would soon collide with everything I was beginning to love. Everything changed the night my mother discovered the truth. I had thought I was careful. I had hidden my notes and my Bible app and whispered my prayers in the dark, but somehow she had found my secret. Her eyes burned with fury when she saw the small notebook on my desk. She snatched it from my hands and flung it to the floor. The pages scattered like fragile wings across the room. I remember the sound of them hitting the tiles like a funeral for my courage. She screamed at me, "How dare you? How dare? You betray our family, betray Allah. I tried to explain that I had questions that I needed, answers that I felt lost, that I needed peace, but her words cut me off. You are ungrateful, disobedient, a sinner. She grabbed my wrist so tightly, I thought my bones would snap. I felt the sting of her hand, the heat of her anger, the weight of betrayal and fear all at once. I remember thinking, this was it. This was the moment my life could end. Not because I had done wrong, but because I had sought truth. My chest tightened, my heart pounded, my breath came in ragged gasps. I had never felt so small and so alive at the same time. Memories of childhood punishment and harsh words flashed before me. Every frown, every harsh correction, every night I had cried alone in my room, every whispered prayer gone unheard. It all converged in that moment, and I realized that the world I had known was gone. She threw the notebook back at me and pointed accusingly. You will renounce this immediately, or you will regret it. I felt the cold fear of death mingled with the warmth of something deeper, the strange quiet in my heart that whispered courage even in terror. I tried to steady my voice to say something, but my mouth trembled. Words caught in my throat, my mind raced through escape routes, hiding places, possibilities, anything to survive. Yet my soul whispered, do not turn back, do not abandon what you are beginning to see. The room seemed to shrink around me, the air thick with rage and the scent of her perfume mixed with anger. Could feel every heartbeat in my body as if it were a drum counting down my seconds. I wanted to flee to the corners of the earth, to vanish into shadows. But I also felt a strange grounding in the small voice that called me toward truth, toward the unknown path that I could not yet name. She stormed out of the room, slamming the door with such force that the walls shuddered, leaving me trembling on the floor, the notebook clutched to my chest. I realized then that I had stepped into a new reality. Reality where fear and longing would battle endlessly, a reality where every step toward peace could be met with violence, and yet I could not stop moving forward. I lay there for hours, hands shaking, knees pressed to my chest, listening to the echoes of her anger and the silent whisper in my soul that there was something greater than fear, something more real than the hollow rituals of obedience. I had followed my entire life. I knew that this night would define everything that came after. The shadow of threat hung heavy over me, but I felt a spark I had never felt before, a fragile courage that said, even if the world is against me, even if my own mother turns her wrath upon me, I must follow this whisper of truth, even as terror grips my heart, because I have glimpsed something I cannot unsee, something I cannot abandon, and the first real storm of my life had passed, leaving me shaken, terrified, and yet, for the first time, awake. After that night, I became a ghost in my own home, moving silently through halls, avoiding my mother's gaze, praying in whispers behind closed doors, and hiding every trace of the books and messages that had drawn her wrath. I felt like I was living two lives, one in constant fear of discovery and one in secret devotion to the God I had only begun to know. I would wait until everyone slept, and then I would pull out my Bible app, reading verses aloud in a trembling voice, letting the words sink into my heart. He is my refuge, my fortress, my God in whom I trust. I whispered over and over, clinging to them as if they were a lifeline. I learned to be careful to hide my phone, to erase every trace, and yet every night I felt a growing peace despite the danger. I felt a quiet courage stirring deep inside. I remember one night lying on my floor, staring at the ceiling and praying with all the desperation of a child lost in a storm. God, if you are real, protect me, guide me. I cannot stay in the fear anymore. I cannot live this life of hiding. Please show me that you see me, that you love me. And then it happened, a dream unlike any I had experienced before. I saw a man of light standing before me, calling me by name. Amina, he said. I felt warmth flood my chest, a love so deep it made me weep. I tried to speak, but no words came, only tears and a sense of being fully known, fully accepted. I woke, trembling, my body soaked in sweat, my heart pounding, yet my spirit somehow lighter than it had ever been. I realized then that I was not alone, that the God I had only glimpsed in whispers and secret reading was real, and that he was calling me forward. Every night after that dream, I felt his presence more tangibly. I could feel him in my chest, in my thoughts, even in the shadows of my room. I began to pray boldly, though still in secret. Father, show me the way, guide me, give me courage to follow you, even if the world turns against me. I felt a strange paradox growing inside me, the tension between fear and faith, between hiding and longing for him became unbearable, yet it strengthened me. I learned to move like a shadow, to pray like a whisper, to let his words sink into my soul, even as the danger loomed outside my door. Every morning, I would wake with the memory of his light filling my mind, and every evening I would crawl back into my hiding places, feeling both terrified and alive. I began to understand that faith is not absence of fear, but courage in the presence of it, that following him may bring danger, but also freedom, that the God I had glimpsed was worth more than every comfort and every safety I had ever known. The notebook on my desk became my anchor. I wrote prayers and reflections in it, as if my words could reach him through the darkness. I felt his love growing inside me, a quiet, relentless force that pushed me forward, even as my mother's anger simmered in the halls above me. One night, I whispered a prayer that I would take a bold step toward him, even if it meant losing everything. And I felt a warmth spread through me, a certainty that I could not explain. It was as if his voice said, "You are not alone. I am with you," and I knew in that instant that no matter the fear, no matter the threat, I would follow him, because the path to him was the only path that gave me life. And in the shadows of my hiding, I began to step toward the dawn. I knew the time had come to step out of the shadows, to speak the truth that had taken root in my heart. Even though fear clutched at every part of me, I chose to share my faith with a trusted friend, someone who would not judge me, but who could guide me in this new journey. My hands shook, my chest pounded, and my throat tightened as I whispered the words I had practiced over and over in secret. I am following Jesus. I cannot turn back. The moment the words left my lips, a strange mixture of relief and terror flooded me. I had never felt so alive and so exposed. At the same time, I expected her to recoil, to call me foolish or sinful. But instead, she smiled gently and took my hand, saying, "You are not alone, and we will pray together." I felt a warmth in my chest. I had never known a confirmation that I had done the right thing, even though the world around me had not changed. My mother's shadow loomed closer every day, and the threat of discovery weighed heavily on my spirit. Each visit home, each glance from relatives reminded me of the cost of truth. I could be shunned, exiled, even harmed for following him. Yet I felt God's presence like a shield around me, a quiet courage I could not have summoned on my own. I began to understand that the narrow path was terrifying because it required everything. It demanded courage, fearlessness, and unwavering trust in God. I faced whispers and pointed glances in the streets, in the mosque in my own home. I felt the isolation creeping in and the temptation to turn back to safety, to return to the rituals that brought comfort but no peace. The tension inside me grew unbearable. I had to choose every day between fear and faith, between safety and truth, and each day the choice became clearer because every moment in his presence, every whispered prayer, every verse I read strengthened the resolve in my heart. I remember one evening, kneeling on the cold floor of my room, hands pressed to my face, heart pounding and saying, "Father, give me strength to follow you fully. Give me courage to stand for you, even if it costs me everything." I felt a deep warmth flood my chest, a whisper of his love and affirmation. "You are not alone. I am with you," and I felt tears streaming down my cheeks as I realized that the courage I had sought had always been with me. Through him, I began speaking more openly to friends I could trust, sharing what I had learned, reading the Bible aloud in secret, gathering courage to stand for my faith, even as my mother's anger reached a boiling point. Confronted me again in the kitchen, shouting accusations and threats. I felt my heart race, but I did not back down. I told her calmly, though my voice trembled, "I cannot renounce him. He is real. He loves me." And in that moment, I felt a strange power in my weakness, a quiet strength in my vulnerability. And for the first time, I understood what it meant to truly stand on the narrow path to follow Christ, even when every step was dangerous, even when the world seemed ready to crush me. Yet his presence was undeniable in my heart, and I knew that courage was not the absence of fear, but the choice to trust him anyway. And as her fury filled the room, I felt peace growing inside me, a peace that no anger, no threat could take away. And I realized that every choice to follow him boldly was a step into freedom, even in the midst of danger. The night it happened is etched into my mind with a clarity that still shakes me. Years later, I had just returned from a small prayer meeting with a trusted friend, my heart soaring with the quiet joy of being with God, and yet heavy with the knowledge that at home danger waited. I walked through the door and immediately felt the tension. My mother's gaze burned into me as if she could see every thought, every prayer, every longing in my heart. I tried to move quietly to my room to avoid confrontation, but it was too late. She had been waiting for me. Her voice rose sharp and unforgiving. "Where have you been? Who are you speaking to? Why are you betraying Allah?" I opened my mouth to answer, but the words caught in my throat. She lunged at me with a rage I had never seen before, her hands grabbing my shoulders, shaking me. I felt my heart leap into my throat, terror and disbelief flooding me all at once. She screamed that I was dead to her, that I had forsaken our family, our faith, our God. The room spun around me. I felt every ounce of my strength drain away, and yet in the deepest core of my being, I whispered, "Jesus, help me. I cannot face this alone. I cannot run. Cannot hide. I am yours. Please protect me." Her hands were tight on my arms. I thought my bones would break my chest. Burned, my breath came in jagged gasps. I remembered every moment of fear from childhood, every harsh word, every slap, every whispered threat, all of it converging in this instant. And yet, alongside the terror, a strange calm began to rise from somewhere deep within me. I felt a presence surrounding me, a warmth and certainty that I had never known. I felt him holding me steady as her rage swelled like a storm around me. I dropped to my knees in the living room, clutching my chest and whispering over and over, "Jesus, Jesus, protect me. Save me in your name. I cannot endure this alone." And then I felt it, the unmistakable touch of his hand in my heart, a quiet power that steadied my mind, slowed my breathing and gave me strength. I stood slowly trembling but upright, and I met her gaze for the first time without collapsing. I told her in a trembling voice, "I cannot renounce him. He is real. He loves me, and he is with me. Even if you hate me, even if the world turns against me, I belong to him." I felt every ounce of fear still present, but alongside it, an unshakable courage that had been growing in the shadows of my hiding for months. Her eyes widened in disbelief. She staggered back and screamed words I cannot repeat, but I knew in that moment that something in her had been shaken, something in me had been strengthened. I felt the truth of his presence flood my soul, and I realized that even if my life was threatened, even if she struck me, I was already safe in him. I saw the flashbacks of every time I had cowered under her hand. Every night I had prayed in secret, every moment I had trembled with fear, and I realized they had all led me to this moment of clarity and courage. She threw herself onto me one last time, hands flailing, but I felt his power surrounding me, a shield I could not see but could feel. I cried out silently, "Jesus, protect me, save me." I felt my body lifted in some invisible embrace, as if his strength carried me through the storm. The encounter lasted what felt like hours, but was only minutes, and then she collapsed onto the floor, exhausted and enraged, and I stood trembling, chest heaving, covered in sweat, tears streaming down my face, and yet alive. My heart pounded in my ears. I could barely breathe. I felt every bruise, every tremor of fear, but beneath it all, a new truth had taken root. I had survived, not because of my strength, but because of his. I realized that my life was no longer mine to fear. I had crossed a threshold into a place where terror and faith coexist, where God's love can shield. Even when the world rages around me, I prayed again, quietly, "Thank you, Jesus. Thank you for holding me. Thank you for giving me courage." And I felt my spirit calm. For the first time in my life, I was still afraid, I was still vulnerable, but I knew beyond any doubt that nothing could separate me from his love. And in that moment, the path forward became clear, even if dangerous even. If lonely, I was his, and he would carry me through every shadow and every storm. The days after that night were heavy with silence and fear. I moved through the house like a shadow. Every glance from my mother reminded me of the rage I had survived. I felt the cold weight of estrangement from my family, the whispers of neighbors, the judgmental stares of people who had once called me friend. I realized freedom had a cost I could not have imagined yet. Amidst the grief and isolation, I began to experience a new kind of presence, a quiet peace that filled the hollow places in my soul. Prayed constantly, reading the Bible in secret, letting his words wash over me. The Psalms became my refuge. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. I whispered over and over, letting each word sink deep. I found an online fellowship of believers, people who had walked similar paths, who had experienced rejection and fear, yet had found joy in following Christ. I shared my story cautiously for the first time with others who understood my fear and my longing. I felt a strange warmth as encouragement and prayers came back to me. I realized I was building a new family, one of faith and love rather than fear and obligation. I wept for the family I had lost, for the home I could no longer fully inhabit, but I also wept for the freedom I had gained. I walked through my days, slowly regaining strength, learning to trust the presence of God in every breath, every heartbeat. I began to understand that forgiveness was possible even when the other person did not seek it, that healing could grow even amidst grief. Read of Jesus and how he forgave those who persecuted him, and I whispered that same prayer over my own heart. Father, help me forgive, even if they cannot hear or change. I began dreaming of speaking openly, sharing my story with others, teaching them that courage and faith can coexist even in fear. I imagined telling people that God's love can protect and restore even the most broken parts of the soul. I realized that my journey was not just about surviving my mother's wrath, but about stepping into a life of purpose in Him. I spent hours in prayer, asking God to guide me to the people I was meant to reach, to use my testimony to give hope to others who felt trapped and alone. I felt a stirring inside my chest, a fire that was both tender and fierce, a desire to tell the world that there is hope beyond fear, that there is life beyond the chains of shame and control. Each day, I practiced trusting Him more, letting go of the anxiety that had weighed me down for years. I felt my heart expand slowly. Learning to love even amidst pain, I knew the road ahead would not be easy, that estrangement could last a lifetime, that scars would remain. Yet I also knew that the presence of Christ gave me a new home in His love. I felt courage growing quietly in my bones, a certainty that no matter the threat, no matter the loss, I would follow Him. I began planning small steps to share my testimony safely, to speak in whispers and online in ways that could reach others who were trapped in fear. I realized that the cost of freedom was steep, yet the reward immeasurable. I had found life, I had found peace, I had found God, and even as the world judged and abandoned me, I knew I had stepped into a new story, one written not by fear, but by faith and love, and in that knowledge I could finally breathe. I began to see the world differently, the fear that had ruled me for so long slowly loosening its grip on my heart. I woke each morning with a sense of purpose and a lightness I had never known. Before I prayed openly in the quiet of my room, read scripture without hiding, and felt my soul breathe, I connected with other believers through online church groups and private messages, finding mentors and friends who became a spiritual family. I realized that fellowship could replace the loneliness and a judgment I had endured for years. Their encouragement strengthened me, their stories mirrored my own, and I felt less alone. I began to notice changes in myself. I walked with a new confidence, my chest no longer tight with fear, but with a quiet courage I could not have imagined. Months ago, I laughed freely for the first time without guilt or restraint, and I felt joy that no one could take from me. The lessons I had learned through pain and danger became my foundation. I understood the cost of truth and the value of faith. I remembered the nights I had hidden in fear, the trembling in my hands, the pounding of my heart when my mother's wrath loomed over me, and I contrasted it with the calm and certainty that now filled me. I realized that the emptiness I had carried for years had been replaced with the presence of Christ, and every moment of suffering had led me to this peace. I began to share small parts of my story cautiously online, offering hope to others who were trapped in fear or questioning their faith. I discovered that speaking my truth was not only liberating, but healing. I reflected on the love of God that had protected me, that had carried me through the moments I thought I would not survive. I understood that freedom was not just physical, but spiritual, a release from fear, shame, and isolation. I started envisioning a life fully lived for Him, where my voice could encourage others, where my testimony could shine as proof that God's love transcends circumstance and danger. I felt growing gratitude in my heart for every trial that had led me to this path. I prayed for my family, silently asking God to heal them and perhaps one day open their hearts to His love. I walked through each day with intention, letting His words guide me. Every decision, every step I took, I realized that I was learning to trust Him fully, without fear or reservation, that the God who had protected me was also shaping me into someone who could be a vessel of hope and light. I compared the person I had been, a frightened girl hiding from wrath and judgment, to the woman I was becoming, confident, joyful, and free in Christ. And I understood that this transformation was not about escaping my past, but embracing a new identity in Him. I felt an unshakable peace that no anger, no loss, no threat could ever take away. I felt a quiet fire of courage and love burning in my chest, and I knew that whatever came next, I would face it anchored in His presence, because I had been reborn through faith, through courage, through His love, and I finally understood what it meant to live fully alive in Him. And the world that once held me captive now seemed wide open, filled with hope and promise, and the certainty that I belonged wholly to Jesus, and in that belonging I had found home. Now my life is a testimony, not just of survival, but of hope of redemption and of the relentless love of Jesus. I spend my days sharing His love safely through online messages, prayer groups, and whispered conversations with those who seek truth. I tell people that no matter how dark the night, no matter how dangerous the path, God's light can guide them. I speak openly about fear, betrayal, rejection, and yet about courage, joy, and peace that surpass all understanding. I remember vividly the nights of hiding the trembling in my hands, the pounding of my heart, the suffocating fear of my mother's wrath, and I contrast it with the peace that now fills every corner of my life. I walk with confidence, I pray boldly, I read scripture aloud, knowing I am never alone. I connect with other believers who have become my spiritual family. Their love, encouragement, and guidance remind me that I am not isolated in this journey, and that God's love creates bonds stronger than fear. I reflect often on the cost of following Him, the estrangement, the judgment, the threat of harm. Yet I know the choice to follow Christ is worth every sacrifice I have learned to forgive, even when forgiveness seems impossible to trust, even when fear presses heavily, and to rejoice even when grief lingers. I share my story not to glorify my pain, but to show others that freedom is possible through him. I encourage viewers to seek truth courageously, to hold on to hope, to remember that God's love will protect and guide them if they take even the smallest step toward him. I want anyone watching to know that they are not alone, that every whispered prayer, every hidden tear, every secret yearning can become a bridge to a life fully alive in Christ. I tell them that the journey may be dangerous, that standing for truth may bring isolation or threat, but that the reward is immeasurable. I speak of his presence in the quiet moments, the unseen hand that guides and protects, the warmth that fills your chest when fear surrounds you, and whisper in your soul that says, "You are mine, and nothing can separate you from my love." I invite viewers to share their own struggles, their doubts, their fears, to connect with others who seek the same truth. I remind them to subscribe to this channel, to like this video and comment and share, so that testimonies like mine can reach others who feel trapped or lost. I tell them that every act of courage, every small step of faith can ignite hope in someone else's heart. I end each message with prayer for protection, for courage, for clarity, and for the revelation of God's love in their lives. I feel a deep gratitude for the path I have walked, for the storms I have endured, and for the way Jesus met me in every shadow, every tear, every trembling moment. I know my story is not over, that each day is a chance to follow him more fully, to love more deeply, and to shine his light into the darkness of fear and oppression. I walk forward now with a heart free and alive, knowing that his presence is my shield, my guide and my home, and I pray that every person who hears my voice or reads these words feels even a fraction of the hope, joy, and courage that he has poured into my life, and that they too may step into the light of his love and find a freedom that fear can never take away.